I've been talking about Newton's second law of motion for some time now, which today is interpreted as F equals ma. And after pointing out multiple problems with it, Stefan asked me, if you don't agree with it, what is your replacement for it? With that, I have to share some wise words from Jeranism.
I have a problem. I've just noticed it so much lately that the Globers' go-to response is always, how does this work then? And how does this work? And it's like, none of us are claiming to be God, all-knowing. We're saying, we found this lie. We no longer believe this lie, right? So it's the equivalent of me going through my mom's paperwork and finding an adoption certificate for myself and realizing, what, am I adopted? My parents aren't my real parents. And so I go show somebody and they're like, well, then who's your real family? I say, well, I don't know. And they're like, well, then I don't believe, I think that's your family. Like, what do you mean?
Stacy, you're not adopted.
Wait, what? I don't know if you guys are trying to spare my feelings or whatever, but have you seen our family pictures?
Are you saying we're stupid?
Yes!
You make some fair points.
Oh.
They said, unless you know your real family, then we're not looking. So unless we can give them what governments and the best mathematicians and the best scientists of their time took 300 years to do, unless we can replicate that in 4 years, then we must be wrong. Or 7 years, however long it's been.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like a person does not have to know who their biological parents are to know that they are adopted, I am not required to replace Newton's second law to know that it is wrong. Now, this is Dr. Perezgiz from PBS Space-Time, and he agrees with me that F does not equal ma, and that Newton's second law is wrong. His reasons are different than my reasons. Nonetheless, I'm going to try and use his words to try and get my opponents to agree with me. We'll see how that goes. Alright, back to the dumbbell. Twirly Socrates, do you agree with me that if the dumbbell on the floor is not accelerating, according to F equals ma, F should be 0 because A is 0?
F, the vector sum of forces on the dumbbell, should be 0, yes.
How about you, Ben?
Sure, if the dumbbell is not accelerating, then the net force acting on it is 0.
Okay, if the dumbbell is accelerating upwards, do you both agree that according to F equals ma, F would not be 0 because A would not be 0?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, do you both agree with me that the floor and the dumbbell are not actually accelerating upwards? This is a really significant question, because here I am asking them to choose between Newton and Einstein.
Suppose I drop an apple. According to Isaac Newton, the ground can be considered at rest, Earth applies a gravitational force to the apple, and that force causes the apple to accelerate downward. But according to Einstein, there's no such thing as a gravitational force. Instead, it's more appropriate to think of the apple as stationary, and the ground, along with everything on the ground, as accelerating upward into the apple.
Yeah, that sounds pretty ridiculous. But let's see what my opponents have to say on the matter. If I want to get them to change their stance, and their foundation is in whatever mainstream says, then it's really helpful to show them some instability, where one mainstream claim disagrees with another mainstream claim.
The power of science is that you build a consistent view based on lots of independent measurements. So that's another long answer, right? But that's how you know. It tends to be consistency that allows you to be confident.
Every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and a house divided against a house falleth. If Satan also be divided against himself, how shall his kingdom stand?
So Twirly Socrates, do you agree that the floor and the dumbbell are not actually accelerating upwards?
In that picture, I agree, they are not.
Therefore, Twirly Socrates should agree with me that Einstein was wrong. And he should agree with me that Professor Brian Cox is also wrong, since he agreed with Einstein.
So you could say the Earth is flat, right? The problem is, though, that there's an interesting thing. They make a very interesting argument. They say they think that gravity that we feel is because the Earth is a flat Earth is accelerating through the universe. Now that's actually right.
I don't believe the Earth is actually accelerating upwards, but pay attention to how many times Brian Cox says that is actually right. He just said it once so far, but let's keep listening.
Right, as I said, Einstein's theory is that what we're feeling now, we're being pressed into our chairs because the ground is accelerating. The Earth isn't flat, though. Space and time are curved, and it's quite a feat of imagination that you need to do some general relativity to work out how can it all be accelerating and yet the Earth stays spherical. And it's one of the things you have to understand general relativity. The thing is that bit's right. So they're right. It's called the equivalence principle. They're bang on.
4 times. He's pretty excited about it. And by saying they are right, he is saying the flat earthers have a correct understanding of it. So don't bother saying, well, you just don't understand. To agree that the floor is not accelerating upwards is to disagree with Brian Cox.
Disagree. Brian Cox is talking about general relativity, and you're not. There is more than one way to accurately describe reality. It's possible to do this, even if the two theories disagree on fundamental axioms.
When Brian Cox claims the Earth is actually accelerating upwards, and you agree with me that the floor is not accelerating upwards, how is that not disagreeing with Brian Cox? Twirly Socrates has chosen not to answer.
Isaac Newton would say that the ball and the feather fall because there's a force pulling them down, gravity. But Einstein imagined the scene very differently. The happiest thought of his life was this: the reason the bowling ball and the feather fall together is because they're not falling. They're standing still. There is no force acting on them at all.
When someone disagrees with me, I try to make my questions more and more basic until someone either changes their mind, runs away, or just ends up denying something as obvious as the nose on their face. Twirly Socrates, do you agree with Brian Cox, who claims that falling objects are weightless?
I agree that a free-falling object won't have a measurable acceleration in a free-falling frame of reference.
I don't see how that answers my question. I think I've got him squirming now. Do you agree with Brian Cox's statement? The flat earthers got it right. The Earth is actually accelerating upwards? Previously, he agreed with me that the floor is not accelerating upwards. Let's see if he changed his mind.
It sounds like he's talking about an outcome of GR which I don't fully understand. He's probably right, but I don't think his remark means what you think it means.
There is no way Brian Cox could say something that crazy and mean it. I guess I just don't understand it. And if I don't understand it, then that must mean you don't understand it. That's what you look like you're saying there.
I agree that Brian Cox is wrong. Gravity is not caused by the Earth accelerating upward through the universe.
Thank you, Theodore. Twirly Socrates, what do you think Brian Cox claimed the flat earthers got right?
I'm not very well versed in GR, but I'm guessing he's referencing the equivalence principle, which states that the local physics of a reference frame in free fall is identical to the local physics of an inertial one. I think the implication is that free fall doesn't involve a force.
Do you agree with me that gravity is a pseudo-force?
Define a pseudo-force.
An imaginary thing that takes credit for something a real thing does. Similar to a magic trick.
All right, stand back.
Yes, oh, this is going to be so much fun. Okay.
A la peanut butter sandwiches.
Oh, look at all the smoke you did, Mumphy. That is wonderful. Did I not tell you?
There you are, all gone.
Oh, you have made the carrot disappear. Is that, where is it? It is gone. He is so good. Okay, now make it appear again. Here we go. Bring it back. Bring it back.
I can't bring it back, Grover. I ate it.
You ate it?
I wouldn't say it's imaginary. It just doesn't fit the description that the other two forces, strong nuclear and electro weak, enjoy.
You don't agree that fictitious things are imaginary?
You can say that mass creates attractive forces, or you can say that mass curves spacetime and follows spacetime geodesics at the speed of light. I'd say that's all imagination, except that they're both extremely good at predicting reality. So no, I don't think gravity is imaginary.
So you disagree with Einstein when he called gravity a fictitious force?
No, Einstein is just saying that gravity doesn't work the way other forces do, and I agree.
You're saying Einstein never called gravity a fictitious force?
I don't know what he said. I just have a rough idea of how GR works.
In the bowling ball and feather vacuum experiment done by Brian Cox, he said the bowling ball and the feather were not actually falling. They were standing still because there were no forces acting on them at all. Do you agree with Brian Cox?
I don't understand how that works.
I'll take that as an I don't know whether I agree or disagree, which is a totally acceptable answer. He seemed so confident before in his claim that the Earth was not accelerating upwards. But now that confidence appears to be shattered, and he seems to be all over the place. If he agrees with Einstein, he'll be forced to admit that F equals ma is wrong. I just think it's funny how I've tried to change his mind on F equals ma so many times in so many different ways, and nothing's shaken him until now, when I point out how Einstein claims the Earth is accelerating upwards, and all of a sudden, that did it. Now let's go back to Ben here and see if we can get farther with him. Ben, do you agree that the floor and the dumbbell are not actually accelerating upwards?
Relative to what?
Relative to what you believe. Are you saying you believe the dumbbell is actually accelerating and not accelerating at the same time?
Sure, depending on the reference frame. If I'm driving my car, it is stationary relative to me. If you're watching my car zoom past, it isn't stationary relative to you.
Do you agree that the car experiences a horizontal g-force as it accelerates, and that the pedestrians do not?
If the car is accelerating, I'd experience additional, horizontal, g-forces due to that. And a stationary pedestrian wouldn't.
Do you agree that the presence of g-force makes the reference frames unequal? Do you agree that g-force is how you determine the thing that is actually accelerating? Equal would make the two reference frames indistinguishable from each other.
Sure.
So you agree that you can distinguish true acceleration from the illusion?
Sure.
So do you believe that this weight on the floor truly has a net force of 0 or not?
From a free-falling frame where we can witness the actual acceleration, the dumbbell has a net force acting on it equal to the contact force from the ground.
Is that your way of saying that the dumbbell does not actually have a net force of 0?
In a free-falling reference frame, considered inertial in GR, the net force on the dumbbell is not 0.
Which reference frame you claim allows you to witness the actual acceleration of the floor?
Yes.
Ben agrees that the net force acting on this dumbbell is not zero. Though his reasons for believing it are completely different than mine, it is common ground nonetheless. Although I will say that I do find it really odd how nothing I said would persuade him, until I pointed out how Einstein claimed that the Earth is actually accelerating upwards. But hey, that's globe Earth logic for you.
How can it all be accelerating and yet the Earth stays spherical? And
Ben, do you agree that the Earth is not actually splitting apart?
Sure.
That appears utterly contradictory to the globe model. Thank you all for watching.